Risk is an essential part of doing business, whether it's taking a risk on a merger or acquisition, taking a risk that purchasing new equipment will be a cost-effective investment, or whether there's sufficient plant protection to avoid injuries to workers. Management needs to understand their level of risk exposure and make sure that it's within their risk appetite. Cybersecurity is, at its heart, the management of risk related to internet-connected businesses. This includes the threat of hackers and malicious software entering from the internet, the vulnerabilities of internet-facing IT systems, and the attack countermeasures or controls, all of which affect how successful the business will be in meeting its desired outcomes. A standard approach to managing risk has been developed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology, and its application is described in Special Publication 830, Guide for Conducting Risk Assessments. The International Standards Organization also provides guidance with its ISO 27005 Information Security Risk Management publication. While there are minor terminology differences, the intent of both documents is the same. Cyber risk focuses on the information technology assets we operate and the services we deliver. It starts with a threat event, which must be analysed to determine that the event will occur. This is done by considering the likely threat actors, their capabilities, and their resources. The intent or motivation needs to be considered. What is it that drives this threat actor to want to mount an attack? An attacker will only attack if the results outweigh the cost of attacking, and that depends on the value of the target to the threat actor. This could be financial gain, obtaining intelligence, disrupting services, or just peer recognition. Think about the scam emails you've received. Who is the likely threat actor? Might it be just a student looking for a couple of extra dollars? Or could it be an East European organised crime gang? Think about their capabilities and what it means for the sophistication of the attack. The next risk issue to consider is the set of vulnerabilities in the information and processing assets, databases, workstations, servers and networks, which this event can exploit to cause damage. For instance, a data center in the basement of a building may be vulnerable to a flood event. A website may have a software vulnerability which can be exploited. A server without an uninterruptible power supply would be vulnerable to a power outage. However, not all vulnerabilities are equal. A flood may be catastrophic, with the whole data center out of action for weeks, whereas an attack which exploits a website flaw may just be a nuisance. Then we consider the impact to the business in the event the threat is realized. This is typically done by carrying out a business impact assessment to determine what systems will be affected, how this flows on to business processes, and the cost of service degradation or failure to meet critical levels of performance. Being able to describe a security event as a business impact is a powerful way of gaining the attention and the respect of the business, and being able to get a well-balanced business decision on what to do about the threat. Controls may have been put in place to protect the asset, and their effectiveness needs to be considered for each of the feasible threat scenarios. This will then allow calculation of the overall risk. The Cybersecurity Risk Management Program starts with sourcing threat intelligence. Let's have a look at some sources of threat intelligence. A useful catalogue of threats can be found at Appendix E to the NIST special publication. This catalogue provides representative examples of adversarial threat events expressed as tactics, techniques, and procedures, or TTPs, and non-adversarial threat events. Another useful source of TTPs is the MITRE ATT&CK site, which is used in MITRE's Cybersecurity Resiliency Framework. This is a detailed source of information on who the threat actors are and how they carry out their cyber attacks. Many of the threats that have been turned into exploits and are being seen in cyber attacks are listed in the ExploitDB database. For example, here we see the details of an exploit against the smart RG router. There are a number of companies that publish malware analysis reports, such as this one produced by VMray. These are useful for gaining an insight into the contemporary techniques being used by attackers. There are 4 possible treatments once an assessment has identified the risk. Risk acceptance, where the risk is within the business's appetite. Risk avoidance, where it's better to stop doing that line of business than take the risk. Risk transfer, where a third party takes the risk, such as insurance to cover the risk should it eventuate. And risk mitigation, where controls are implemented to reduce risk. Risk mitigation and the protection of business outcomes which they provide means implementing controls in the form of cybersecurity policies, processes, and technical solutions. We'll cover controls shortly. A key part of risk management is maintaining a record of the risks that have been identified, and where relevant, tracking the progress of work to reduce the risk. The normal way to record risks is in a risk register. This could be a manual record, but more usually it's automated. The basic form of automation is using a spreadsheet, as shown here. Larger organizations may use the more sophisticated governance, risk and controls, or GRC solutions, although the principle, as far as managing risk, is the same. The risk register contains the basic risk information such as an ID and name, classification information, and the risk owner. It also contains a summary of the consequences of a risk being realized. The risk information is usually presented in 2 ways. The first is the inherent risk, assuming no controls are in place. This is useful to know because it determines how strong the controls need to be. The higher the risk, the stronger the control. Then the control details are provided and a residual risk is calculated to show the current risk that is being experienced by the business. Take a few minutes to set up your own spreadsheet risk register, as we've just discussed, and add an entry, malware infection. Think about your own situation. What could be the root cause, the consequence, and the inherent risk level? What controls do you have in place? And what is the residual level of risk? Risks can be shown as bubbles on what's known as a risk heat map, where individual risks are charted in the cell which exists at the intersection of the likelihood row and the impact column. This is sometimes called a risk bubble chart. A typical approach to managing risks is to accept any very low risks which appear in the green area. Low risks, shown in the gold area, are accepted but monitored to ensure they don't increase. Medium risks in the yellow area are scheduled for routine remediation work, and high and very high risks are shown together here in the red area and require immediate remediation. This form of risk chart is very common, and it provides a succinct way to present a high-level picture of the risks. Sometimes the bubble chart is enhanced to show the planned progress of mitigations, using an arrow and a bubble to identify the final expected risk level after mitigation. This is a powerful way to show the work being done to reduce risk. The term risk context refers to the risk bubble chart and the tables used to determine likelihood and impact. Here we can see the tables representing the 5 levels of likelihood, which make up the vertical axis on the heat map, and the multiple tables representing different perspectives on impact, which together make up the horizontal axis. These tables are typically developed specifically for the business by their risk officer. The risk context should also include guidance on the actions required to be taken at each risk level, reflecting more urgent action and more intense oversight at the higher levels of business risk. NIST in December 2018 issued revision 2 to their original Special Publication on Risk, SP 837, Risk Management Framework. The Risk Management Framework provides a disciplined, structured and flexible process for managing security and privacy risk. It covers information security categorization, control selection, implementation and assessment, system and common control authorizations, and continuous monitoring of risks. The Risk Management Framework considers risk at 3 levels: information systems risk, mission or business process risk, and whole of business risk. The risk management process involves preparation of the necessary risk material needed to carry out risk management, and then a 6-stage process of categorization, selection, implementation, assessment, authorization, and monitoring. The prepare stage of the framework involves 7 actions, 3 of which are risk-related and 4 controls-related. They are: assign people to risk management roles, prepare the risk management context, also known as the risk strategy, complete an organization-wide risk assessment, establish control baselines according to the standards relevant to the organization, identify common controls, and prioritize them according to the potential impact of an attack, and develop the plan for monitoring control effectiveness. The categorize phase overlaps somewhat with the prepare phase, as it requires a full review of the IT systems in use, particularly identifying the system characteristics and the information they process and store. The next step is to determine the impact levels to confidentiality, availability, and integrity. And the final step is to get business endorsement or authorization of the 3 impact classification levels. The select stage requires that controls are selected and tailored to the specific system environment to mitigate all risks to the system that are beyond risk appetite. This is judged by determining the risk level and then identifying from the risk context whether controls are required. The steps in the select stage are control selection, either by adopting a baseline set of controls, by a custom set of controls driven by the risk assessments, or by a combination of both. Control tailoring to suit the operating environment. Control allocation to systems, ensuring that the specific business requirements for security in that system are met across people, process, and technology. Documenting the controls for each system in a system security plan. Developing and implementing the approach to continuous monitoring of control effectiveness. And gain business approval of the system security plans and continuous monitoring process. The next stage is to implement the controls that have been identified for the system and maintain the system security plans accordingly. The assess stage is about through-life assessment of the system to ensure that controls are effective and there is no evidence of a breach. There are 7 steps in this stage of the risk management life cycle. Assessor selection, based on candidate qualifications and target knowledge. Develop the plan for the assessment, and carry out the assessment plan for the controls. Report on the control effectiveness, providing findings and recommendations. Remediate any findings that can be immediately rectified, and develop an overall plan of action for findings that can't be immediately rectified. The purpose of the authorized stage is to provide organizational accountability by requiring a senior manager to determine if the security and privacy risk represented by the overall set of risk management activities and plans is acceptable. This stage has 5 steps for developing the submission, management review, additional risk management response to any issues raised, approval decisions for each system, and an authorization report. The final stage is monitoring. This is a key stage of the framework which provides the ongoing situational awareness about the security and privacy posture of the information system and the organization in support of risk management decisions, and includes some of the above stages. It has 7 steps. The systems and environment are monitored for any changes that might occur. In-flight assessments are performed as required. Any issues identified are responded to. Risk management documents are maintained, and security and privacy risks are reported regularly. Authorizations are given to systems as required, and systems are securely disposed of when no longer required. One of the more important IT frameworks for the enterprise is COBIT, the Control Objectives for IT. COBIT is published by the Information Systems Audit and Control Association, ISACA, and its purpose is to ensure that enterprises have in place an effective and auditable set of governance and management processes for IT, which deliver value for its stakeholders. COBIT is designed around a set of processes. These are grouped into the 4 areas of plan, build, deliver, and monitor. We can see at the top left the plan group, known in full as Align, Plan and Organize, with its 14 APO processes. Below that is the Build, Acquire and Implement group. It has 11 processes. At the bottom of the diagram are the 6 processes in the Deliver, Service and Support group. And to the right is the Monitor, Evaluate and Assess group with its 4 processes. The COBIT framework is used by the financial sector for carrying out IT general controls, external audits. Consequently, having a COBIT-aligned security framework is the first step in putting in place an IT environment which will meet regulatory obligations. From a cybersecurity perspective, there are 2 key processes for security. APO 13, Manage Security, in the Plan group, and DSSO 5, Manage Security Services, in the Deliver group. Of course, there are many other processes in which security plays a part. For example, security incident management is an important activity, but this falls within the overall IT process of DSSO2, Manage Service Requests and Incidents. Let's take a look into APO 13, Manage Security, which defines the requirement for security management. The process description is define, operate and monitor a system for information security management. And it has 5 goals. Support IT and business compliance, support the management of IT and enterprise risk, contribute to the transparency of IT costs and benefits, ensure the security of information, infrastructure and applications, and provide reliable information for decision making. APO 13 consists of 3 control objectives. APO 13.01 establish and maintain an enterprise information security management system. APO 13.02 define and manage a security plan, which establishes a set of objectives to progress towards the desired security posture. And APO 13.03 monitor and review the ISMS. The Enterprise Information Security Management System, or ISMS, defines the approach taken to ensuring information security is effective, and this is often aligned to the set of requirements outlined in the international standard ISO 27001 Information Security Management Systems requirements. While APO 1301 is a single control objective, to satisfy it involves putting in place a number of lower-level controls from the ISO 27000 series of standards. Let's look now at the second security-focused process, DSSO5, Managed Security Services. The description of this process is to protect enterprise information, to maintain the level of information security risk acceptable to the enterprise in accordance with the security policy, establish and maintain information security roles and access privileges, and perform security monitoring. Essentially, DSSO5 defines the requirements of operational security. DSSO5 provides operational processes to satisfy 3 of the 5 APO 13 goals: support IT and business compliance, support the management of IT and enterprise risk, and ensure the security of information, infrastructure, and applications. There are 7 operational security control objectives in DSSO5, which provide the foundation for a defensive cybersecurity program. Let's take a look at what's in each of them. The first control objective is protect against malware. Malware is one of the main challenges in cybersecurity today, and protecting against it involves a number of activities and controls. These include antivirus, security patching, security information awareness, and in contemporary terms, cyber threat intelligence, change management, security filtering of email and web traffic, and security training. The second control objective is managed network and connectivity security. This includes establishing and enforcing policy on network connections, enforcement of password entry, the configuration and use of firewalls and intrusion detection systems, network security protocols and communications encryption, network configuration, security mechanisms to ensure trusted transmission and receipt, network security control testing and penetration testing. A critical control for this objective is network segregation. Manage endpoint security covers the security of laptops, desktops, servers, mobile devices, and network equipment. It requires that controls are put in place to ensure the endpoints are securely configured, hardened to remove unnecessary ports and protocols, and that remote access is managed. The next control objective is manage user identity and logical access. Identity and access management is a very complex issue, and this one control objective can easily consume half the effort in a mature cybersecurity program. It's also the area which generates a good proportion of all audit findings, so it pays to keep a tight focus on it. This process requires that identities are managed from creation to removal. Access rights are established and maintained in line with the roles and responsibilities of the organization. That access to systems and information is authorized and authenticated. That privileged access is strictly controlled, and that access rights are regularly reviewed, and that appropriate audit trails of access are kept. The fifth of these control objectives covers the management of physical access to IT assets. This includes perimeter protection, such as fences, doors, and locks, intruder detection systems, access controls for data centers and office spaces, identity cards, and visitor management procedures. Increasingly, the use of cloud-based infrastructure is reducing the effort required to manage this area, but increasing the dependence on and the oversight of third-party security. Managing sensitive documents is an increasingly important aspect of security, as the focus of protective measures shrinks from the perimeter to the information itself. With employees taking laptops out of the enterprise and sending data out to mobile devices, perimeter security devices such as corporate firewalls no longer protect enterprise information. New techniques such as digital rights management and mobile email encryption need to be employed. This process also includes information and device-centric controls, such as passwords or PIN-controlled printing and PIN codes on mobile devices. Finally, monitor the infrastructure for security-related events, provides the detective controls which are needed to identify security breaches should the enterprise's preventative controls fail. This control objective includes the operation of intrusion detection and prevention systems, logging and alerting security-related events, operating log management and security information and event monitoring systems, delivering security incidents to the incident management process, carrying out forensics, and managing evidence. These are all key activities for a cybersecurity operations center. The term cybersecurity means to protect things in cyberspace from attack, and we do this by using security controls. When designing our controls, we need to make sure they're fit for purpose. Firstly, we need to check whether the cost of the control is more or less than the loss associated with the impact of the attack. We often see a curve graph to explain this, where we plot the cost of an increasingly powerful control against the benefit it provides. Where the benefit in additional risk reduction outweighs the cost of achieving it, we don't proceed with any further control. Secondly, we need to consider how effective the control is against the threat. The result of assessing the risk based on the likelihood and impact of a threat is known as the inherent risk. When controls are implemented, there'll usually be an acceptably small level of risk remaining, which is known as the residual risk. We can apply what's known as a multi-tiered or defense-in-depth control strategy to mitigate cyber risks. There are 4 key types of controls that can be applied, and it's generally recommended that 2 or more are used together. The first is deterrent controls. These reduce the threat. An example of this is incarceration, which deters would-be criminals from carrying out their attacks. Preventative controls are designed to stop the attack from succeeding by not allowing it to get at an asset to exploit a vulnerability. A firewall is one such preventative control, blocking protocols that might be used as attack vectors. Detective controls are used to detect that an attack has taken place. A burglar alarm is a typical detective control. And finally, corrective controls are used to reduce the impact of an incident, and a good example of this is recovery from data backups. The NIST Cybersecurity Framework presents corrective as the respond and recover functional controls. Let's look at an example. In order to protect data from unauthorized modification, we firstly apply access controls to ensure that anyone trying to access the data has been authorized. In case this fails, we then monitor for any data changes. If data is changed maliciously, we can recover it by restoring from backup. While controls can be applied by an enterprise as a customized response to business risks, in many cases an external authority will direct that a predefined set of controls be adopted as a baseline for security. An example of government policy is SP 853, Security and Privacy Controls for Federal Information Systems and Organizations, which federal organizations are required to adopt. An authority may be an industry body, such as the Payment Card Industry Council, which requires that merchants adhere to the payment card industry data security standard. NIST's SP 853 is one of 2 important control frameworks used in cybersecurity, the other being ISO 27002. They're both structured as a set of control categories. Within each exists a number of specific controls. While the categories and the controls are different for each standard, they can be mapped against each other. These 2 control frameworks are widely referenced by other security schemes, in particular the NIST Cybersecurity Framework. The controls in ISO 27002 are described in a 3-tier hierarchy of security category, security control objective, and control. Let's have a look at an example. Here we can see access control is the main category. Operating system access control is the control objective, and user identification and authentication is the control. The NIST SP853 controls are described in a two-tier hierarchy. In this example, identity and authentication is the control family, and identity and authentication organizational users is the control. The description is very similar to the description of the ISO 11.5.2 control. An important first stage in implementing a control framework is to create what's known as a statement of applicability. The statement of applicability is the main link between the risk assessment and the selection of controls, and its purpose is to provide evidence that all controls have been considered. The controls that aren't applicable won't be implemented, and the rationale for omitting them is recorded in the statement of applicability. Developing a clear statement of applicability is a good way to reduce the effort required to meet and maintain a compliant and effective security posture. There are a number of specific considerations around controls. Common controls can be inherited by one or more systems, reducing both deployment and ongoing operational effort and cost. Where specific controls are called for, but are either not yet present or can't be implemented, then compensating controls will be required, such as sample checks of manual authorizations in the absence of an electronic authorization process. Once a control has been implemented, it needs regular testing, and this should be a routine part of any compliance program. Control testing involves two stages: testing design effectiveness and testing operational effectiveness. Design effectiveness is checked by verifying that the control as implemented meets the original design requirements. For example, to carry out a design test of control ISO 11.5.2 user identification and authentication would involve verifying configuration files to confirm that access to the system requires entry of a user identifier, and that a password or some other form of authentication is required prior to allowing access into the system. Operational effectiveness involves testing the system and making sure that the control is continuing to be effective against attack. For example, a penetration tester might attempt an SQL injection on the user identifier field in a logon form to see whether access can be gained without entering valid credentials. There are a number of industry standards of good practice which provide guidance on cybersecurity. The most well-known is the ISF Standard of Good Practice. It's essentially a risk and control framework for managing cybersecurity. The Standard of Good Practice is consistent with the major recognized information security standards such as ISO 27002, the NIST Cybersecurity Framework, COBIT, and PCI DSS control standards. It also aligns with the controls required to satisfy Europe's General Data Privacy Regulations. It incorporates the ISF Risk Assessment Methodology, or IRAM, which presents a risk management scheme with the three phases of business impact assessment, threat and vulnerability assessment, and control selection. Let's have a look at what the ISF controls look like. The ISF Standard of Good Practice structures its controls into categories, areas, and topics. Let's have a look at the Security Monitoring and Improvement category. It has 2 areas and 8 topics. The 2 areas are Security Audit, with its 5 topics, and Security Improvement, with its 3. If we dig down into Security Monitoring, topic S12.1, it has a principle. The information security condition of the organization should be monitored regularly and reported to executive management, and an objective: to provide the executive management with an accurate, comprehensive, and coherent assessment of the information security condition of the organization. The Standard of Good Practice is a comprehensive industry approach to security, but only available to members of the Information Security Forum. The Central Bank of the Netherlands, DNB, has published a cybersecurity standard of good practice as guidance for the financial sector. This is freely available from their website. As we can see, it takes a risk and testing perspective on controls. The standard is structured into categories, with each having one or more controls. There are almost 60 controls detailed in the standard across these categories. The standard contains a maturity model in support of the process category. Here we see 5 levels of maturity, starting with initial and progressing through repeatable, defined, managed and measured, to continuous improvement. Each level builds on the previous ones and adds more rigor to the process at each step. Here we see one of the controls. This is the DNB Standard of Good Practice guidance on security and monitoring. The DNB standard isn't as well known as the ISF standard, but it is free and it contains a lot of valuable guidance. Security doesn't exist in isolation. It's a characteristic of a business service, a business system, and business information. All of these are either secure or not secure. Although in reality security isn't black and white, it most definitely comes in shades of grey. Nevertheless, organisations will often adopt a set of controls to secure their IT systems and not consider whether or not these reflect any of the requirements of the business. Rather than just adopt a generic control set, we can use what's known as enterprise security architecture to architect a security solution which meets the needs of our business, and then apply the controls that are necessary to achieve that architecture. One of the most popular enterprise security architecture frameworks is SABSA, the Sherwood Applied Business Security Architecture. SABSA is used to capture business requirements and then determine what security is needed to meet those requirements. The basic construct in SABSA is its architecture matrix. The 2 top layers, the contextual and conceptual, contain the elements of the architecture necessary in the strategy and planning stage, while the 3 lower layers, the logical, physical and component, contain those necessary to design secure IT systems and processes to support the higher level business goals and objectives. This matrix is used to capture all relevant security concepts and activities for the enterprise, and these are shown in summary in the cells. Security is often defined in terms of the information assurance we achieve by considering a system's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. This approach came from early work on models of security, and while it's a very common approach, it's also a very constricting and artificial paradigm. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability are indeed 3 attributes, but they're not the only ones. We can add more, such as non-repudiation, authenticity, utility, but to create an effective information security architecture that's business-centric, rather than security-centric, this is still inadequate. The SABSA framework provides a comprehensive set of business security attributes which have been collected from hundreds of consultancy projects, and most, if not all, attributes that an organisation needs to define their own concept of security can be found here. SABSA's many attributes are grouped into 7 categories in what's called an attribute taxonomy: user, management, operational, risk, technical, legal, and business. These categories represent the focus of the business outcome which is being protected by the attribute. This is, in effect, a picture of what business success looks like. This set of attributes are often used as a pick list from which to choose a relevant subset of attributes for an architecture project, and they're quite useful as a cross-check on the attributes derived from the business. We can show the attributes in a business-relevant form. Here we show the attributes representing activities which are important to the military: preparation of the force, intelligence regarding the battlefield, the characteristics of operations, commanding and sustaining the force, and providing protection of the force. When we architect security, we start with business goals and objectives. Here's a strategic business construct showing goals and objectives. The smaller ellipses together represent the objectives which are required to meet the goals in the larger ellipses. We can analyze the objectives to determine what we need in terms of security attributes to ensure the objectives are met. In this table, we can see some general business objectives. We call these business drivers, which map to a number of the individual enterprise technology and business division objectives. For each of these, we can describe the business driver as a set of security-focused attributes. We can then use these attributes to measure security across the organization, and we can map them down to the information systems which support the various business processes. By measuring the effect of a security incident on an attribute, we can map this easily back to the business goals and objectives which depend upon it. There's much more to SABSA and enterprise security architecture in general, but the main takeaway is that we need to always look at security through business eyes, because security is what we need to achieve business success. Cybercriminals understand that credit cards are a lucrative target for attack. The Payment Card Industry Governing Body, the PCI Council, has responded to this threat by issuing the PCI Data Security Standard as an actionable framework for developing a robust security regime for cardholder data. More recently, and in the light of state-sponsored attacks on personal and government data identified in the Snowden leaks, government regulators have enacted regulatory requirements for notification of data breaches, in particular the European General Data Protection Regulations. This has increased the business liability in the event of a data breach. It's now critically important for any business taking payments through credit cards to protect their information and transactions. It helps to understand the terminology of PCI when reviewing the data security standard. Let's look at the key terms. A merchant is someone who takes a credit card or debit card as a form of payment. A service provider is someone who provides a service that is used for payment card information storage or transactions of a merchant. A qualified security assessor is an independent person certified to report on PCI compliance. An internal security assessor works for the merchant and is certified to submit a self-assessment. A data breach is a failure of security which results in the loss of cardholder information. Cardholder data or information is the primary account number, the cardholder name, the expiration date, and the service code. The sensitive authentication data is the encoded data on the magnetic stripe or chip, the card verification value, and the PIN. In the event of a data breach, the card company will launch an investigation to determine the cause. If the company has its PCI compliance, it can claim safe harbor. If not, it could face a hefty fine or removal of its right to accept credit cards. Regardless, it will face remediation costs, which could include card replacement and possibly customer compensation. With that background to PCI, let's now look at the PCI Data Security Standard itself. The standard provides a set of actionable controls, together with testing procedures, to provide a clear definition of what has to be done to achieve compliance. Version 3.2 of the standard provides 12 technical and operational requirements areas covering almost 200 mandatory controls. Let's have a look at some of the key controls for the first 6 requirements areas. The first requirement is to have an effective firewall configuration. This means that firewall configuration standards have been set, that all firewall changes are tested, and that the rule sets are reviewed every 6 months. A network diagram must be maintained for any part of the network that stores, transmits, or interfaces to payment card data, and data flows across the network need to be defined. Traffic not related to cardholder transactions must be denied access to the cardholder's systems, so it's normal to have a segregated PCI zone on the internal network so that the traffic can be managed at the PCI zone gateway. A demilitarized zone is required for any systems with direct internet access, and this needs to be firewalled at both the internal and external gateways. Firewalls are not just for the enterprise. Mobile devices, including any employee-owned devices that are allowed to be connected to the internal network, must have personal firewall software installed and operational, with a configuration that's not able to be changed by the employee. This is a key consideration when thinking about bring your own device or BYOD environments. The next requirement is that all default passwords and insecure configuration settings are changed. Security configuration standards are required for each device and system component to allow effective hardening, and all unnecessary ports and services should be removed. Stored cardholder data has to be kept to a minimum and protected, and no sensitive authentication data can be stored even in encrypted form once authentication has been completed. The account number, when displayed, must be masked, typically by replacing all except the last 4 digits with asterisks. When stored, the account number must be protected through strong cryptography or one-way hashing. Key management is a critical part of any cryptographic solution and must be implemented effectively. Transmitted cardholder data on open networks, such as the Internet and unprotected wireless networks, must be encrypted, and end-user systems such as email and messaging must never be used to send unprotected account numbers. The cryptographic scheme must be effective, and what's effective may change over time. For many years, the Secure Sockets Layer, SSL, had been a common cryptographic solution for web access. In 2013, a fundamental vulnerability in the scheme was detected and exploited in the Heartbleed vulnerability. Subsequently, the PCI Security Standards Council determined that the Secure Sockets Layer protocol was no longer an acceptable solution for the protection of cardholder data. Systems processing cardholder data must implement antivirus software to provide protection against malware on both endpoint devices and servers. As some malware may enter a system prior to its signature being included in the antivirus database, regular scans must also be undertaken. Threats and vulnerabilities should be monitored through vendor alerts and threat intelligence feeds, and critical security patches must be installed within 1 month of release. Development and test accounts must be removed before systems are put into production, and custom development must include source code review prior to implementation, with special attention given to common vulnerabilities such as SQL injection and cross-site scripting. Production account numbers must not be used for testing. The next 6 security requirements in the PCI Data Security Standard address the level of security required outside of the PCI environment. Of particular interest is the requirement to restrict physical access, which extends to special purpose devices used to read cards. ATMs and more recently embedded readers in devices such as gas pumps are regularly targeted by criminals who install skimmers which can copy credit card data. These are big business. In April 2015, a sweep of 6,000 gas stations in Florida found 81 skimmers attached to gas pumps. This particular scam has been estimated to make, in the US, as much as $3 billion a year for criminals. Let's revisit the Information is Beautiful data breaches site shown here. At the far left of the graphic, there's the May 2021 data breach into Air India, where credit card details were leaked. Check the number of customers for which details were taken. and assuming all had credit card details stored, calculate what this breach was worth to the criminals if each card was used for a malicious $10 purchase. This has been a quick introduction to the PCI Data Security Standard. There's much more detail provided by the PCI Council on this and their other standards, and these are available for download from their website shown here. Cloud technology is no longer a novel approach to deploying infrastructure, but is a mainstream option for enterprises. Cloud security solutions may be deployed by the enterprise IT team, or solutions may be deployed by business groups. There are three forms of cloud deployment in common use: infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, and software as a service. However, there are many more specialist forms of cloud service that can be used. In all cases, there's a need for security controls to be used to protect the cloud solution, just as there is for an open-premise solution. However, there are some differences in the controls when using them for cloud, and there are some new controls that need to be considered. The International Standards Organization has produced an ISO 27000 standard for cloud, known as ISO 27017. This is based on ISO 27002 and includes an additional 6 controls. NIST has produced the SP 800-144, Guidelines on Security and Privacy in Public Cloud Computing, which refers back to the SP 800-53 controls. However, the main reference for cloud security is the Cloud Security Alliance Security Guidance for Critical Areas of Focus in Cloud Computing, with its 14 areas of controls. These domains provide a full description of cloud, its security needs, and the controls needed to protect cloud deployments. The guidance is supported by a Cloud Controls Matrix, which can be downloaded from the CSA site shown here. The Cloud Controls Matrix provides the fundamental security principles that should be adopted by cloud vendors, and that can assist cloud customers in assessing the overall security risk of a cloud provider. It provides clarity on the shared responsibilities between the cloud service provider and customer, according to the form of cloud. More importantly, it provides a controls framework cross-reference to the other major security standards recognized in industry. Version 3.0.1 of the CCM has 133 controls in 16 domains. The 16 domains can be seen here. They don't align with the domains in the security guidance for critical areas of focus in cloud computing, but they do provide a comprehensive coverage of security across cloud, starting with application and interface security and finishing with threat and vulnerability management. However, the main reference for cloud security is the Cloud Security Alliance Security Guidance for Critical Areas of Focus in Cloud Computing, with its 14 areas of controls. The Internet of Things is a term which means everything that's connected to the Internet that isn't a standard laptop, workstation, or server. One dictionary definition of the Internet of Things is the interconnection via the Internet of computing devices embedded in everyday objects, enabling them to send and receive data. Wikipedia goes a little deeper and defines the Internet of Things as a system of interrelated computing devices, mechanical and digital machines, objects, animals, or people that are provided with unique identifiers and the ability to transfer data over a network without requiring human-to-human or human-to-computer interaction. An obvious characteristic of the Internet of Things is that it's connected to the Internet. It may only send data, it may only receive data, or it may do both. An important class of Internet things are the low-power things, those objects which have an embedded battery and no external power supply. These are often required to have a life of 10 years or longer, and so require very low power operation. One of the first organizations to provide guidance on security for the Internet of Things was the IoT Alliance Australia, a part of the Australian Communications Alliance. Its initial Internet of Things Security Guideline was published in February 2017 and provides an introduction to IoT technology and the key IoT industry sectors. It covers legal, privacy, security, resilience, and survivability issues, as well as IoT device development considerations. There is no definitive set of security controls for IoT, although organizations such as OWASP and GSMA have provided some guidance. The IoT Security Foundation has published a comprehensive set of 142 controls in their security guideline, which are grouped into 13 areas of compliance. Take a moment to think about the challenges in providing guidance for IoT. A small sensor may have little memory and a very low power processor, but an industrial SCADA device may be as powerful as a modern PC. Think about an IoT soil moisture sensor, which is deployed out in the field and has to run on its own internal battery for no less than 10 years. Jot down 2 reasons why you wouldn't want it to have to run antivirus software. An interesting additional attribute that the IoT Security Foundation has tagged to each control is its compliance class, which can be one of 5 values relating to the data generated or the level of control provided by the device. The control is then relevant to the IoT device if its compliance class is equal or higher to the control tag. Class 0 means that the compromise is likely to result in little discernible impact on an individual or organization. Class 1 means that the compromise would likely have limited impact on an individual or organization. Class 2 devices are those designed to resist attacks on availability that would have a significant impact on individuals or an organization. Class 3 devices, additionally, are designed to protect sensitive data, and Class 4 devices are those which have the potential to affect critical infrastructure or cause personal injury. We're likely to see much more attention being given to IoT security controls as we see deployments into key sectors such as intelligent transport and smart cities. Commercial cybersecurity products and services can be very expensive, and often we'll pay for 100% of a product and use only 5 to 10% of its functionality. However, cybersecurity doesn't need to be expensive. We can cover many of our cybersecurity needs with open source products and get a solid capability in place for minimal cost. Having gained experience with them, we can then better determine where we have gaps and which areas we need to invest in to grow our capability. A good place to start in looking for open source solutions is the Kali Purple platform, which has been developed as both a cyber defense workstation and as a cyber defense platform for server-based tools. You can check out the details of Kali Purple in my Complete Guide to Kali Purple course, or by going to the Kali Purple wiki in GitLab. Let's take a look at some of the open source products we can use. There are 3 popular open source firewalls: pfSense, OpenSense, and SmoothWall. These are great solutions to start with, and as we outgrow them, we can consider moving up to higher performance commercial products. Behind the firewall, we might want to set up a demilitarized zone or DMZ, and run a proxy server to manage all traffic in and out of our internal network. Nginx is a well-respected web and proxy server which we can use. Another important tool to have running is a web application firewall. This tool monitors our web traffic to stop attacks on our web applications. Unfortunately, the open source WAF solutions for Nginx have been pretty much discontinued, so this is a gap we'll need to address when we upgrade Nginx to Nginx Plus. We'll also want to have an intrusion detection system to monitor for malware coming through the network. Suricata is an open source intrusion detection system that we can install. Another key area of cybersecurity capability is log and alert monitoring. There are a number of open source solutions for this, including ELK, which stands for Elastic, Logstash and Kibana. These solutions provide dashboards and real-time log displays which allow us to see everything that's happening on our networks and in our systems. Here's an example of the ELK solution running on Kali Purple. Being able to check that we've patched our vulnerabilities is one of the more important capabilities that we need. The Greenbone Vulnerability Manager provides a dedicated vulnerability scanning solution as a community product, and as our needs grow, we can seamlessly move up to its commercial version. Here's an example of GVM running on Kali Purple. A slightly more sophisticated capability is threat hunting, which is where we proactively check out networks for any malicious activity we might not have caught with our monitoring. A good example of what we might use is the Malcolm solution developed by Idaho Labs and the Department of Homeland Security. This integrates a number of tools, so we can check the details of sessions that have been run and deep dive into our logs after the event. Velociraptor is another threat hunting tool with which we can run queries concurrently across large networks. This provides an extremely efficient way of investigating the spread of malware. Again, it's running on Kali Purple. Another open source threat hunting solution is Selks, which is again built on Elasticsearch and Kibana. This is designed for smaller networks, and we can move to the commercial grade Stamus security platform as we outgrow the community version. Wazoo is an open source multi-role solution providing alert monitoring, compliance, and vulnerability management all in the one tool. Here we see Wazoo running on Kali Purple. There are many more open source solutions, and guidance on installation and use of many of these is being delivered as part of the Kali Purple initiative. Putting open source or commercial tools in place is a good start to securing our networks, but it isn't the complete answer. Tools need trained staff to use them effectively, and cybersecurity requires lifelong learning. While we may design and implement security into our systems, this doesn't mean that it's effective. In fact, most breaches occur on solutions which have been supposedly secured using good industry practices. The reason for the security failures vary. Some breaches occur because of poor design or implementation. Some occur because of poor security hygiene in the business. And some because new exploits have been found which enable an attacker to circumvent security. There are a variety of basic assurance methods that are used by organizations to check their systems. The key ones are vulnerability scans, which identify the services which can be accessed and check that they have all known patches applied. Security control audits, which predefine a set of conditions based on the control and predict the expected results. And penetration tests, which use known exploits and exploit techniques to try to circumvent the security control. In addition to their own testing, organizations may contract out independent evaluation of their systems. This is typically done to provide some form of certification that the system can be trusted by its users. Many organizations now gain certification against ISO 27000 for the whole business, to demonstrate that their processes covering design, implementation, and operation of systems are secure. Vendors may submit their products for evaluation in accordance with what's known as the Common Criteria Scheme. This provides an independent view of product assurance, from a basic statement of document compliance to an increasingly rigorous level of evaluation. The Common Criteria Scheme is recognised by many countries and is the main scheme used for product assurance. However, some governments have begun to question the efficacy of evaluations of overseas products, even when they're done locally. The original 5 members of the Common Criteria Group were the US, the UK, Australia, Canada and New Zealand. New Zealand and the United Kingdom are no longer authorising countries. Assurance isn't a perfect answer. Certified organisations do get breached and evaluated products do get exploited. However, carrying out assurance testing raises the bar substantially and avoids organisations falling victim to simple attacks. With the move to automated assurance testing, that bar is raised even further as the vagaries of the human element are removed from the testing process. The General Data Protection Regulation of the European Union is a law which enforces the protection of the privacy of European citizens, with mandatory rules for how organisations and companies must use any information which directly or indirectly could identify a living person. This is known as personal data, and a couple of simple examples are your name and phone number. The Act has become globally relevant because it applies to any services being consumed in the EU, no matter where they're sourced. With a 1% global revenue fine for failure to comply, compliance is a high priority. There are 6 principles in the Act. Personal data is to be processed in a lawful, fair and transparent manner. These process characteristics don't involve cybersecurity directly. It must be collected for a specific purpose and only used for that purpose. Again, this is a process characteristic and doesn't involve cybersecurity. It must be limited to what's needed for the purpose and no more. Another non-cybersecurity characteristic. It must be accurate and kept up to date. Cybersecurity capabilities can be used to maintain data integrity, which contributes to its accuracy. But keeping it up to date isn't a cybersecurity capability. It must be kept in a form which minimises the exposure of a person's identity and only retained for as long as necessary. Cybersecurity can certainly help here by enabling encryption of data. The last principle is fully cybersecurity. It requires appropriate security for personal data, including protection against unauthorised or unlawful processing and against accidental loss, destruction or damage. GDPR requires organisations to implement appropriate technical and organisational measures to secure personal data. This requires businesses to ensure that their cybersecurity defences continue to be effective against evolving cyber threats. A good GDPR compliance programme involves risk assessments, ongoing maintenance of the security infrastructure, and continuous monitoring of networks in order to detect and respond to any intrusions. Some key cybersecurity controls for GDPR compliance include encryption of personal data, control of access to data, and regular audits. These are all standard controls used in most cybersecurity programs. An alternative to encryption of data is to mask or tokenize it, and this is a security control generally associated with privacy. In addition to the normal controls, a data privacy program needs to have breach notification protocols in the event of a data breach. Other privacy-specific controls include data minimization practices, data protection impact assessments, and implementing privacy by design principles. While not cybersecurity controls as such, these will often fall to the security team to manage as part of the wider security and privacy program. The term Zero Trust is the new ABC of security. Assume nothing, believe no one, and check everything. It means that the security mechanisms that we use to protect our systems shouldn't make trust assumptions, but rather should assume that any access request could be malicious. The context for Zero Trust is the decision-making process, which mediates access from a source or subject, which could be a person, a system, a serverless application or function, or an artificial intelligence, to a resource or object, which could be data, a system, an application or function, or another artificial intelligence. There are many definitions of Zero Trust. Here we see that NIST defines Zero Trust as an evolving set of cybersecurity paradigms that move defenses from static, network-based perimeters to focus on users, assets, and resources. Microsoft has a slightly longer explanation rather than definition of Zero Trust. However, we can see that the key sentence here is that every access request is fully authenticated, authorized, and encrypted before granting access. CrowdStrike considers Zero Trust to be a security concept that requires all users, even those inside the organization's enterprise network, to be authenticated, authorized, with a continuously validated security configuration and posture before being granted or keeping access to applications and data. The concept of Zero Trust first emerged from Forrester in 2011 in a report by John Kindervag. The Forrester concept of Zero Trust is based on two principles. First, threats are present at all times, no matter where our system is located. We must therefore be prepared to defend against them at all times. Second, just because a network is an internal network doesn't make it trusted. Our adversaries have shown that they're very capable of penetrating into our networks and moving through them. So Zero Trust then is a paradigm which recognizes that a business secrets are no longer secure behind the corporate perimeter, as they cannot be protected effectively by just having perimeter firewalls. While there's no commonly accepted definition for Zero Trust, there are 4 security mechanisms that are recognized as necessary for a Zero Trust solution. Just-in-time access is a mechanism used to provide the means to positively authenticate an entity request at the time the request is made, rather than assuming the request is authentic because of a token or certificate that was issued in the past. Just-enough access is a mechanism which ensures that only those privileges needed to carry out the request are provided, and only for the duration of the request. This is the approach used by the more advanced privileged access managers, where a new set of credentials are issued just for the duration of a specific work ticket. This is a powerful defense against account-based privilege escalation. Zero Trust brings with it a notion of data-centric security. As such, tokenization or encryption mechanisms are needed to desensitize data and so reduce the data attack surface. This means that much of the risk, particularly around data breach, is avoided. And the final mechanism is real-time access policy, making dynamic policy adjustments using a rich source of environment information. This enables access decisions to adapt to a more dynamic environment in which subjects' rights and privileges and object sensitivities may change quickly. The number of successful attacks on and technical failures of critical infrastructure has been a concern for governments for some time. While nations have focused on the full spectrum of their own critical infrastructures, the European Union has focused its efforts on the European financial sector. The result has been the enactment of the Digital Operational Resilience Act, or DORA for short. In order to achieve a high common level of digital operational resilience across the European financial sector, DORA establishes a common set of security requirements, including cyber risk management, cyber incidents, resilience testing, threat and vulnerability intelligence sharing and national cooperation, and third-party risk management. Risk management under DORA reflects existing best practice in cyber risk management. It requires a risk management body to be established, with overall responsibility for the risk strategy, setting risk policy, and defining roles and responsibilities. This body would approve such things as business continuity, incident response plans, third-party services, and audits. Organisations are required to support risk management with a comprehensive set of information security policies. A documented risk management framework must be put in place, reviewed annually, and be included in the audit plan. The framework must specify the organisation's risk tolerance and define key performance indicators for information security. Continuous risk assessment of business processes and their related technology must be carried out. Organisations should establish business continuity plans, which include business impact assessments, and they must regularly test their plans. Central security depositories must have a geographically separated secondary processing site for enhanced resilience. Business continuity is one of the key aspects of the operational resilience focus of DORA. Organisations should have a comprehensive incident management process and document how cyber incidents are detected, the plan for communicating about incidents, and they must provide evidence that this approach is effective. Incident management should include early warning indicators. Incidents should be prioritised and their response tracked, and root cause analysis should be carried out. DORA introduces a classification approach for incidents, which takes into account key aspects such as the duration of the incident, the criticality of the asset, and the economic impact of the incident. Major incidents will need to be reported to national and European authorities in a harmonised format. Ensuring effective and time response to incidents is another key focus in DORA. Organisations are required to perform vulnerability assessments before any technology deployment into the financial infrastructure, and then maintain a comprehensive programme of ongoing resilience testing. This will include vulnerability scans, analysis of any open source solutions which are in place, assessment of system, network and physical security, source code reviews, scenario-based and end-to-end testing, and compatibility and performance testing. DORA introduces the concept of an Advanced Threat-Led Penetration Test, or TLPT, which must be performed by accredited TLPT testers at least once every 3 years. Testers will be expected to demonstrate specific expertise in utilizing threat intelligence and be competent in using penetration and red team testing techniques. Organisations must establish a comprehensive register of information detailing contractual arrangements with third parties. Third-party arrangements will be reported annually to national authorities and in turn to European authorities. Service providers will be required to provide access for inspections and audits. Audits will assess various aspects of the service provider's security posture, including data protection, incident response capabilities, disaster recovery plans, and overall operational resilience. Cloud providers in particular must demonstrate adherence to DORA regulations regarding risk management, incident reporting, and digital operational resilience testing. DORA notes that financial entities may exchange threat intelligence within the trusted financial community. In addition, the European authorities will foster cooperation with non-European nations to promote the principles of DORA, DORA is a new act for the financial sector, but mostly just reflects existing best practices in information security, but with greater emphasis on areas of resilience. Technical standards to provide common levels of protection are being developed and will be issued as delegated regulations for the EU. These will apply to both financial institutions and their service providers. There's been an increasing level of concern in governments about the potential for cyber attacks through the supply chain. A particular issue is the risk of malicious changes to open source libraries used to build software. As a result, the 2021 Executive Order on Improving Cybersecurity directed that vendors will provide details of the software components used in their solutions. The order directs vendors to provide a purchaser a software bill of materials, or SBOM, for each product directly, or by publishing it on a public website. Pursuant to this requirement, the Department of Commerce issued a publication entitled The Minimum Elements for a Software Bill of Materials. This publication covers 3 areas. The data fields required in an SBOM, support for automating SBOM management, the practices and processes relating to SBOMs. The data fields in the SBOM must contain sufficient information about each component to enable purchasers to track them across the software supply chain. The SBOM may also include other non-mandatory identifiers. Specifically, the baseline component information includes the vendor or supplier name, the component name, the component version, other identifiers such as vulnerability and license database keys, dependencies with other components, and an author and timestamp for the SBOM entry. Vendors must provide support for automation so that SBOM management can be scaled across the software ecosystem. Tooling of SBOM data management requires well-defined data formats and API specifications. There are currently 3 main SBOM data formats, which are both machine and human readable, and these are interoperable. The Software Package Data Exchange, or SPDX format, Cyclone DX, and the software identification. The third area of guidance is in respect of practices and processes relating to SBOM use. These include: a new SBOM must be produced to accompany a new release of the component. All top-level component details, together with their dependencies, must be provided to enable lower-level dependencies to be found recursively. Any unknown component dependencies must be detailed. SBOMs should be available in a timely fashion, either by accompanying the software or being accessible, for example, on the vendor website. And where a vendor wishes to control access to their SBOM data, accommodation must be made for purchasers to gain access to and use that data. Beyond the minimum elements, vendors are encouraged to provide additional information such as references to component entries in vulnerability databases and license conditions. Providing assurance information, such as a hash value of the component, is also recommended. The way in which component vulnerabilities in software as a service is managed is different to that of on-premise products. The vendor must assert that they have defined and will manage their SBOM in line with the minimum element guidance.